Roll. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Doing good, living the dream as always, right?
What's the dream?
That's a great question. I would say what the dream is.
Right
I'm
off the
living the dream, but I
bat.
don't know what the dream is. I
That's
guess what
fair.
we're doing right now, right? We woke
Hell
up
yeah.
another morning and we're alive. Didn't
Mm-hmm.
get much better than that.
Hell yeah, dude. Absolutely. It's funny. I saw I saw your Insta story. And so first off, how do you pronounce your last name? Is it Posin or is it
Posing.
Posin?
Nailed it
It
for
was
sure.
funny. I was watching your
So,
Instagram story this morning and it's like the most common. I don't know why it is, but everybody calls me Brian on social media, but it's Ryan. It's just like the funniest. I'm like, fuck.
you know why? Because when your Instagram hashtag looks like body by Brian,
Yeah,
I just said
you like
Brian
mix it in together.
Castle. Yeah. I believe I knew your name was Ryan. Let's go with
You did.
that.
You
And then
definitely did.
Your IG just threw me way off for a loop, right?
Dude, I
Um,
literally have people I've known for years, and they're like, "Oh, Brian." I'm like, "No."
I know. I met you once, you know. Well,
That-
let's take it slow.
exactly. So why don't you tell the people a little bit about who you are and what you do, and a little
Yeah,
bit of your story.
yeah, I'd love to. Before I go in, have you seen the movie Goonies?
Hell yeah, dude. I was just
All right,
in
just
like
want to make
Cannon
sure.
Beach, Oregon, like a couple months ago, and that was like I made it a point to go see like where they filmed part of like the Goonies.
The reason I bring this up is every time someone I jump on a podcast, they always ask me the same question. My brain goes to the scene. Remember when Chunk is like with the Fratellis? He's got like his hand in the blender and they're
Uh-huh.
trying to get intel from him. And they're like, tell me everything. He's like, everything? And then he goes back to like third grade. I'm always like, how far back do I really need to go here? Like, are we talking kindergarten, first grade, or
Oh
should we get to the
man.
details, right?
Yeah. You know what? I'll leave that up to you, but I love a good origin story. That's like
My
so wherever
story's
you go.
really not that exciting. I don't have like a rag to riches story or anything like that. I mean, I was born in Indiana. That's probably the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. But I was raised here in Maryland, and yeah, I mean, I'll get into kind of soldier fit and everything like that. But for me, I mean, if we're getting into like the health
Yeah.
and fitness side of things, like I played sports my entire life. You know, from as early as I can think of to all the way through college, and that's been obviously a pretty pillar monumental thing in my life.
Yeah.
Now that I have kids, it's like even more and more important
Mm.
for my kids to do sports. And it doesn't have to be sports. And I use sports like shit, could be a piano lesson or something like that. But
Mm.
getting them involved in something, right, that they can suck at it for a while and then
Yeah.
slowly get better. Just like the characteristics and character traits that like competitive sports and all those things teach you.
Mm.
The teamwork, the camaraderie, like all that stuff, right? Leadership, competition,
Mm.
those are so important. And they're, I guess pillars for me as far as, growing up, why I got into health and fitness. It's
Mm.
always kind of been a part of what I've done. And, I saw how it helped me, transition. God, I made a ton of friends through sports, a ton of friends through fitness. So it's not always like the physical aspect of like getting in good shape, learning good habits
Yeah.
from exercise and nutrition, but just like the social aspect. Not to dig in the weeds too much, but like a lot of that is lost in today's society with social media,
Hmm.
obviously with the pandemic, happening years ago. We've all been kind of in our own bubble.
Yeah.
Just whether this is like a lesson or a plod for people to get involved in outside activities, like it just helped me dramatically and kind of helped me, I guess guide me in the place where I am today.
Mm.
Was through sports. But so I grew up, I played football in high school, played football in college.
Let's go.
I ended up getting a business degree, minor in communications. Not that that ever helped me, right? I guess I learned just enough to like graduate and get by.
So true.
Like, did I really apply all those principles into what I do today? Probably
Right.
not. But anyway, out of college, I kind of was lost. I didn't know what to do. I went on a bunch of interviews for like suit and tie, like mortgage
Mm.
broker. I think I interviewed for like selling copiers a couple times. Like I had no clue what I wanted to do. And I was just totally like rejected interview after interview because they always said like you need more experience. And I'm like, well, how do I get experience if I can't get a job, right? Like I just got out of
Yes.
college. What do I do? Like guide me, please.
Yes.
And so then I connected with a local gym that I had done PT for in the summers, and I got a job doing membership sales. I was lucky enough to kind of climb through the ranks, become a general manager, oversee multiple clubs, and then me and my business partner, we started Soldier Fit, shortly
Hmm.
after. So that's kind of my story summed up. We can dive a little
Yeah.
bit deeper into to kind of some of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, but actually, I'll go back to sports because I think this was a pretty monumental time in my life. And we talk about like what sports can do, but like coaches. I mean, you're a
Mm-hmm.
coach, I'm a coach. There's probably a lot of coaches listening to this. Like the massive impact that coaches have on people's lives from
Hmm.
an early on stage. I mean, I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't get into like the bad stuff, right? But I was a kid, right? And I remember my freshman year. I played junior varsity football. I got bumped up to varsity in my last game, and I was cocky, right? You know.
Hmm.
And so my sophomore year, I came in and I got decimated. I was like 135 pounds, soaking wet, playing up varsity. I just got completely beat down, and I was just like, what the, like I lost all belief in myself, from that point on.
Hmm.
And there was one coach in particular, and he was like probably like one of the biggest mentor impacts that I've had from an early age, minus my parents and my siblings. He had said to me, he said, he essentially instilled belief in me,
Hmm.
when I didn't have it myself. And it's so powerful, right? For someone to be able to do that. I was just like
Hmm.
so beat down, like I had such low confidence. He said, Dave, like you are going to go on to do special things. Like whether you saw it last year or not, like you have that it factor,
Yeah.
and I believe in you. And if you just keep going, right, like you are going to be exceptional. And I was like, just honestly, it was just one conversation that he had
Yeah.
among many things, but like, and he probably doesn't even remember this if he's watching. Like, as coach, you say things all the time. Even as parents, you say these little things, and you're like, to you, it's just another Tuesday, right?
Right.
But to a person that you're talking to, like, man, those are like core memories that stick with you for a long time.
I love that, dude. I mean, just because the advice he gave you, like you said, it's like for him, he was just like, I need this player to get his confidence back so we can win some games, right? He can contribute and do better. But the advice he gave you, though, like that is powerful, man. Right? Like he's like the because it's different. Like you mentioned, like your parents are mentors, your siblings are mentors, right? Your friends. But like to have somebody who is coaching you in that sense, right? Where you look up to that person and they're like an authority figure in a different way, for them to say you're going to go on and do great things, that is
Yeah.
such a, especially as a kid, right? Like that is such a powerful thing to be validated for when you can't even see it yet, right? Like that gave me chills when you even said that. Like I think that is such a powerful, beautiful thing for him to say
Yeah.
at the time.
I got goosebumps talking about it for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and anybody out there can be that person for somebody else. You don't
Mm,
have to be a coach or an authoritative figure. You could be a friend, you could be a family, a coworker.
yeah.
Just like believe in somebody at a time that they don't believe in themselves. I mean, you can flip someone's life around just like that with one conversation.
I love that. And how did that conversation, like how did you take that and then because we have like this belief that we've now been given, right? This little boost of confidence. What did your actions do from there to help sort of take you to that next step or like how did that affect you going forward after?
Yeah, I've always been kind of a quieter guy, kind of
Hmm.
like lead by example. So
Yep.
like if I do my thing, everyone else will just naturally follow.
Yeah.
I think it got me to see myself in more of like a leadership light,
Mm,
right? And not just kind of worry about taking care of myself, but getting the other teammates and
yeah.
everybody on board. Obviously, he was a phenomenal coach. Like he knew what he was doing. I mean, we
Hmm.
had the hardest workouts you can think of, he administered, and just like
Yep.
doing those hard things obviously built more and more confidence completing those things little
Yeah.
by little.
Yeah.
But I think I got to see myself in a different light that I
Mm,
can also like affect other people as well by
yeah.
what I say and do.
Mm. Dude, I relate to that so much because that was so I grew up playing football too. And I think in a similar, you sounded like one of those freak athlete kids that enter high school and you're just like, yeah, you'll start the last two games of your freshman year, you'll start your varsity like sophomore year. It's like there's like those certain kids who are just like, yeah, they're like they got talent right away and like they're gonna play right away. For me, it was like I had to be the one that busted my ass and like worked in order to see any sort of playing time. But that was for me a big part too, was it was leading by example, right? And I think that is such a important, I think especially now, right? Especially as coaches, right? I think when you lead by example and you actually do what you say, I think that is such a power. I can only imagine as a parent too, right?
Yeah.
It's such a, I think that's just defined like as integrity, right? It's like you're doing what you say when nobody's watching.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting you say what you just said. I was talking to a client the other day, and
Mm,
they're similar. Like they don't have the freak genetics and everything like that. And
hmm
I said to them, and they're older. I said, look, you have an advantage that you probably don't realize that you have, because so many people when they're younger, they relied on their genetics.
mm,
They didn't learn the lessons that they needed to learn as they get old and their metabolism slows down and
hmm
things just stop naturally working. Like they don't know how to pivot because they've never
mm,
experienced that before.
right.
People that have had to work harder, right? They're at a disadvantage in the beginning, but they've learned those lessons along the way
Mm,
to where like their metabolism starts to slow down, things aren't working. They immediately have that like bred inside of them to be able to turn on a dime and fix it. Whereas
mm,
again, other people who have just relied on natural talent, they don't quite know that, and
right.
so it's like new to them. It's a shock. And
Right.
some people, they just don't know what to do.
Right. It's almost like the habit, and it's like a habit, right? It's a skill that you develop, the ability to pivot, the ability to adapt, right? I think that is I mean, I think it's something I've candidly been working on most of my life, is like how do I let go of something when I know it's time to let go in order to free myself for that next step or what I need to focus on in front of me, right? I think that is such a it's both a mindset, right? And it's both like an actual physical skill that you have to administer.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, and the reason I said I related to like the football stuff too, because I think anybody who played sports is you really do develop a lot of the skills that you have now in terms of like leadership, in terms of working with a team, in terms of like attitude when things don't go your way, and like how you present yourself afterwards. It's like, so I think that's a really beautiful slash also just like a smart thing for your to get your kids involved early, right?
Yeah.
Because of the skills that they're learning. Like, I love that you said you're starting on things they suck with, right? I think
Always.
that's super important. So is for in terms of like how that impacts kids and stuff like that, you know, what are you essentially like, what are the biggest lessons you want your kids to take away from playing sports? And like how does that, like how as a parent do you sort of, let them do their thing, but also like being there if they need it?
I know. Well, there's two things. The first one I'll address, it's a
Yeah.
fine line, right? Of like pushing them to do something and getting them past that barrier and having them
Mm,
continue, than being that pushy parent where you're pushing a kid into doing something they don't want to do. I mean,
hmm
naturally, as humans and kids are the same way. Like, we don't enjoy doing things we're bad at.
yeah.
And anything you try new, you're going to be kind of bad at it. Like some things
Mm,
you'll be good, some things you won't. And if you just do things you're good at, you're never going to experience new things. So as a parent, I think it's my responsibility to say, like, okay, you're bad at it. That's why you don't like it.
mm,
Let me just kind of push you a little bit to at least get past that breaking point to see if maybe this is something you want to do, which
mm,
kind of goes into my second lesson. I mean, this is the most important thing for me is like once my kids start something, they have to finish it.
mm,
Cool. So if I sign them up for soccer or baseball and they don't like it mid-season, fine. You don't have to sign up next year, but you have to finish the season,
mm,
right? Your teammates are relying on you. You're relying on yourself. So I'm not going to allow them to quit.
Mm,
That was definitely something that my parents instilled in me. It's kind of a crazy, wild story.
yeah.
I haven't told too many people this, but so I was on my way to football practice one day. I think I was in like seventh grade, and I don't know why I did not want to go to football practice that day. And I was like crying in the car to my dad, like, I don't want to go to practice. I don't want to go to practice. I don't want to go. He goes, okay. He said, you have two options. He said, either you go to football practice or me and you go into the backyard full pads and we do one-on-one drills. I was like, okay, I will certainly go to practice, sir, and I will never complain about going to practice again. But needless to say, like I went to practice and I didn't ever not go to practice. Like I continued on
Mm,
with all whatever responsibility was given to me until I
yeah.
completed that. And so, there is a fine line between pushing your kids to do something, but
Yeah.
also like again, doing it enough so that they get better,
Mm,
so that they want to continue on. And then
mm,
there's also a fine line, and I haven't conquered it, right? Like between like too much encouragement and just enough encouragement. Like
mm,
you don't want to tell your kid they're amazing at everything
mm,
because one, they're not, right? And
right.
two, they're just going to think they're great. And then once they do bad, they're not going to know how to handle it.
Mm,
But you also need to give them enough encouragement and belief, as we talked about, to continue on. So that
mm,
it's a very fine line, with parenting, right?
yeah.
Like the things that we say, again, can go a long way, but a lot of times as parents, like we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves
Mm,
to like say and do the perfect thing.
yeah.
We say something wrong, it's like, holy shit, like is my kid scarred for life because I said
Right.
it's like it's a lot
Right.
of pressure to put on
Right.
yourself. You
Are
know what
they
I'm
working
saying?
through it in therapy in 10 years
Yeah,
from
yeah. You're like,
now?
okay, how do I rebound from this?
Right.
What do I say? But I
Yeah.
think it's also like as a parent, if you say the wrong thing or screw up, like be a human and you
Mm,
can tell your kid that you screwed up. You said the
yeah.
wrong thing. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. A lot of times like we want to be that dad, that mom, that authoritative figure that makes no mistakes.
Mm,
When in fact, like, just with anything, like vulnerability is super, super important.
mm. What was and that's one of my favorite words.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite words is vulnerability. What was, I guess, what's been your relationship with vulnerability? Like, how have you noticed it develop over time, and what was kind of that big? I mean, was there a moment, or was it just like over time you realized how important that is, especially in how you live your life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not very good at being vulnerable, or at least I
Mm,
haven't been in the past. I've certainly got better over the years.
mm,
Um, I think I've always been someone like I don't want to say I strive for perfection.
yeah.
Um, but to me, at least in my eyes, right? Like I've always been expected to do good things and
Mm,
big things. And so to me, I don't want to say like I've been put on a pedestal, right? Like, and I don't want to let anyone down,
mm,
which is a big weight to carry, for
mm,
a lot of people, right? That expectation and trying to live up to it. And so, for me, I understand as the more and more that I get in business and the more that I lead people and develop teams and coach people, like how important, being vulnerable, being honest, being open is,
mm,
and just proper communication. So I mean, it's really still something that I work towards
mm.
every day.
Yeah.
Uh, Not that I'm afraid to show my failures, but
Right.
I think it's what drives me, right? Like it's kind of a weird thing to say. I don't know if this makes sense. Like I'm more driven by not wanting to fail than wanting to win,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Almost like that fear of failure, right? It's like,
Yeah.
how do I avoid this as much
And
as
and again,
possible?
I don't mind failing. I've screwed up plenty of
Right.
times, and I don't
Right.
mind publicizing it, at
Right.
all. I think there's something deep and down inside, like I I don't want to lose. I don't like
Mm,
losing, and that
mm-hmm.
drives me way more
Mm-hmm.
than winning.
Right. Right. I mean, I think because winning almost feels like it's like when you get it, you're like it's like almost like a brief feeling, right? It's like you get that bit of joy, you get maybe like that bit of excitement, a little bit of adrenaline rush, and then it kind of fades, right? So it's
Yeah.
kind of like the motivation you're using is almost like a it's like an everlasting gobstopper, right? It's like
Yeah, there you go.
like
Little Willy
this thing.
Wonka reference. I love
That's
it.
right. It's like this thing is sticking around because it allows you to push yourself on the days where you don't want to, right? Which is kind of what you talked about with your story with you and your dad, right? It's like
Yeah.
you he that day he made you show up when you didn't want to, right? And I think that was a super powerful lesson that he taught you early on too.
Yeah. God, the older I get is like, there's really no such thing as winning, right? The
Mm,
game just keeps playing on.
mm,
Winning is really just staying in the game, right? Because like you said, I mean, you made a great point. Like you accomplish one thing, is it really winning when you're on to the next?
mm,
Like if you think about it, I mean, we use fitness for example, and someone's goal is to bench 135 pounds, and then they bench 135 pounds. Like they're going to say 135 pounds is nothing. Like look at all these
yeah,
people benching 225 pounds. I got to bench 225 pounds.
that's so
And then
true.
they bench 225 pounds and they're like, man, like all these people are benching 315 out there. I'm not very
Mm,
strong. I got to get to
yeah,
315 in order to be where I want to be. And
yeah,
it's one thing after the other. We're never, and it's a good thing, I guess. Like you don't want to get complacent, but
mm-hmm,
you got to be careful, to drive you in a negative way, through insanity or kind of
mm.
giving up or something like that.
That might be my favorite quote that you just said. You just said winning is just staying in the game. I think
Boom.
that's really deep, dude.
Right. Love it.
That is so true though. I think especially when we talk about, anybody who's whether their goal is weight loss, whether their goal is just fitness for the long term or being as independent as possible, especially as we get older or things like that. I think when it comes to like actual application of life, it's like I'm just trying to stay in the game as long as possible, right?
Yeah.
That's so so true.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
was
it's
go ahead.
when you're younger, it's like you have that sense of like invincibility. So you don't quite realize it. It's like the age
Mm,
of wisdom, you
mm,
know. When we're young and people gave us advice, like, do we really listen?
right.
We're like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I said that to my
Right.
parents, right? I mean, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I know everything. And then as
Right.
you age, you're like, man, I think they really did know what they were talking about. I
Yeah.
probably should have listened to them. Uh,
Right. That's so true. And I think, and it's funny because I remember because we can even say like we had great mentors who did instill like those lessons with us that did stick and create like core tenets in us, right? That allow us to show up as we are now. But it's also at the same time, it's hard to process all their wisdom because you haven't lived through wisdom yet, right? And I think that is what the process of growing older is just living and experience years and years and years to finally get that one lesson that somebody told you and you're just like, oh shit, that's what they
yeah,
meant.
it's all part of the journey. It's God's plan, I guess, right?
1000%,
Yeah.
1000%. So part of your journey is Soldier Fit, right? So I'm curious kind of because you said like, and again, I can relate to it too. And that's why I was like, oh shit, Dave, there we go. But it was like when I graduated college, it was the same thing. I was trying to get a job in wellness, like corporate wellness. And same thing, nobody would hire me because I didn't have an experience, but I was trying to get experience. And I relate to that a ton. And that's when I became a trainer. 'Cause I was like, this helps me with that. So for you, you mentioned that your journey led you to doing like, GM of gyms and then running other clubs. Like, how did it lead you to starting Soldier Fit?
Yeah. There was a lot of things. I met my business partner working at that big box gym.
Hmm.
Um, which obviously I couldn't have done or opened Soldier Fit without him. And he's, a huge pillar of the success of the company. He's a visionary type individual. I've learned a ton from him. But I think at the time, at least, I felt like I was capped out,
Mm,
right? And they had made some changes internally, and I just kind of saw the vision of the company being a ceiling.
mm,
I have an interesting story. I was probably 23, 24 years old. I was a general manager of a gym. I was feeling pretty confident about myself. Like, it's pretty
yeah,
damn good. 23,
yeah.
24 to be a GM. And one of the members that I knew pretty well, he walked up to me one time and he was like, so Dave, like, when are you going to get a real job? And he probably didn't say it in those words. I think that makes it sound a little
Yeah.
off. He's
That's
basically
how
like,
you
what are
interpret
you
it.
going to do when you grow up? And I'm thinking to
Mm,
myself, like, damn, I thought this was it, but I guess not. Like, now that you say it that way, And it kind of hit me a little bit, but it also was like,
Mm,
maybe this isn't it. Maybe there's more out there that I should
mm,
strive to achieve. So that was kind of the start of it. But again, I saw that there was really not much more growth inside of the company to where I wanted to go.
mm,
And both sides of my family were business owners. My dad's side owned a bakery and delicatessen in Washington D.C. called Posin's Bakery, and I saw kind of the rise and the fall and the waves of business ownership and everything like that. And I think at the time, I didn't quite realize, um, you know, I don't want to say like some of the hardships of business,
mm,
just because you're a kid, you're kind of immune to that. But now as I grow up, I'm like, okay, I kind of see why things were the way that they were. And my mom's side of the family, her grandfather owned a sporting goods store in Indiana.
mm,
And we all know what happened to sporting goods stores. So they didn't last too long after
mm,
that, but they were a huge staple in the community nonetheless. So
mm.
I guess it's always kind of been in my DNA. But
Yeah.
I got to the point where I was like, look, you know, I see all the good that comes out of these big box gyms. I see the community. I see the personal connection side of the house. Like the group exercise program was like when people walked in, they were high-fiving, they were friends, and then other people in the gym were kind of just like plugged into their own earphones and doing their own thing,
Mm,
which is fine. It's not a problem. But I was like, man, like, can we bottle that community feel up? My business partner had served in the army. I was like, can we take that and like make a real boot camp? There's a
mm,
lot of companies that are claiming or doing boot camp by saying like dynamic fitness boot camp, Brian's boot camp, but none of them really like related around to like military style exercises, military values, giving back to
mm,
veterans. I mean, you walk into a soldier fit facility, there's a big Humvee desk, as you can see, like we wear a
mhm,
uniform, we line people up into squads, you're meeting new people, you're connecting with the community. We're like, we can create this, we can create something special.
mm.
And so it was a long road. I mean, we started out just like doing one-on-one PT in gyms. We did boot camps outdoors. We subleased space at martial arts studios, fitness complexes, and things like that. And then we actually grew two sublease spaces, pretty sizable, like 300, 400, 500 members,
Wow.
which was pretty good. We were busting at the seams, and we said, look, like if we want to expand this thing more, we need to go into our own brick and mortar stores. So we made that transition. And it was that time I was still there was a time period where I was still working for the gym
Mhm,
and doing Soldier Fit. It was kind of a conflict of interest. So I was a little behind
mhm.
the scenes. But shit, I mean, when we started this, we had like handheld credit card machines, like manually typing people's
Oh
credit
wow.
card numbers. I mean, this is real old school stuff.
Yeah.
I'm showing my age as far as that goes. But I remember like I was kind of in and out. I was working for the fitness company, but helping out with Soldier Fit on the side. And my business partner came to me one day and he was like, look, like we have something big. We can make this big, but I can't do it alone. I need you to be all in. And it was
Mm,
actually perfect timing. I just got engaged. I just bought a new house.
mhm.
So it was the perfect timing to take a 70% pay cut, quit my job, and go into business full time, right? I mean, it makes sense to do.
Yep.
So I was like, you know what? Like let's do it. I quit my job, took a massive pay cut. Things were tough in the beginning. I mean,
Mhm,
shoot, we had I remember like the first few months, like we were struggling to make payroll. All the back end systems and processes weren't quite there yet. So it was a rough go in the beginning, but man, I mean, we had an incredible team, incredible. Our members are amazing, and just vision, mission, teamwork. Kind of brought us to where we are today. I mean, we have 10 locations. We franchised, 5 years ago. So the goal is to
wow.
become a national company.
Wow.
Soldier fits everywhere.
That's I think that's so one, I definitely it's probably was scary as shit, right? I'm sure like
Yeah.
taking that step to pursue the unknown, right? What is I guess what would be your advice for somebody who is feeling called to take a unknown step, right? What's your advice to somebody who their intuition's telling them to do something, but they're scared to do it, right? I guess what would you say to them?
Well, one, get a business partner that gives a hell of a sales pitch. That's number one. Like, yeah, he sold me.
Yeah.
He the greatest sales pitcher of all time. I was like, I was ready to run through a brick wall. But I guess if you don't have that, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I guess you need to figure out like what is your purpose, where you want to go, and
Mhm.
is it fulfilling you where you are now? And if the answer is no, like you kind of have to take the leap and
Mhm.
say like, do I want to have this feeling? Do I want to be where I'm at 10, 12, 15 years from now? Because a lot of times we think maybe it's too late in life to make a shift, to make a change. I'm
Mhm.
already past that point, but I mean, it couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, if you listen to
Yeah.
like Gary Vaynerchuk talk about it, I mean, you're never too late, right?
Right.
And just say like, okay, I hate using this because people trash it all the time, but it works for me. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, it's such a
Mhm.
shitty thing to say, such a
Yeah.
negative thing to say, but like,
Yeah.
what's the worst that can happen, right? I mean, worst case scenario. Okay. Now that I have that, like, what's the best thing that can happen?
Mhm.
And then you outweigh the odds.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that I think, and I actually think that's a positive way to spin it, right? Is like, what's the worst that can happen, right? Because when you actually, because I think our own worst nightmares, when they stay in our head, they ferment, right? But when you actually lay out the worst things that can happen, you're just like, it's not too bad, or it's just like we could figure that out, right? And I think that is the importance of laying out worst case and best case because I think our minds and this is something a big lesson I learned this year is like when we lean into that unknown, all we know, like our ego only knows what we're losing, right? We can only measure what you're about to lose. So like in your case it was I'm losing this GM job, I'm losing 70% of my salary, right? Like I'm potentially taking on all this debt because I have a house and mortgage and marriage and all these things, right? But you could have never, like, I imagine when you took that step, you would have never imagined how much you gained in the years since then.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just the learning experiences from it too, you know?
Mm,
I mean, I think obviously complacency kills. And it's one of those things where I talk about this a lot. Like you talk about like the middle class,
mm.
kind of veering off, but just follow me for a
Yeah,
second,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I'm with
The
you.
middle class to me is probably one of the massive disadvantages because they're in that situation where like they don't want to take a risk
Mm,
because they're comfortable where they are and they're not on that lower end so that they can kind of live and survive, but they're living this kind of like mediocre
mm,
life. I don't want to say that because it's not true about everybody, but it is. I mean, people that are comfortable, comfort complacency kills, comfortable
mm,
kills.
mm,
It's hard to take that jump just because you don't want to lose what you have where you are.
mm.
Whereas if you're on the bottom and you have nothing to lose, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
what's the worst that can happen? Well, I'm already
Right.
there right now. And
Mm,
that's why you hear all these crazy stories of like the most successful people have like bottomed out, at one point in their life and they are where you are. I
mm,
don't think you need to bottom out to do that. I think you can apply the principles that we just talked about. And, for me, I would recommend, and I wish there was more of this available in my younger years.
mm,
It just wasn't a popular thing is like mentor,
mm,
um, like a business mentor or a coach or somebody who has done, what you're trying to accomplish. They can collapse time,
mm.
right? Collapse time. Have you overcome fear? Because a lot of times we know the answer to our problems. We just need
Yeah.
someone just to tell us, just to give
Mm,
us that little bit of confidence that like, okay, I know what I'm talking about. I know the answer. Everything's going to be okay. There's somebody
mm,
on our shoulder just letting us know who's been there.
mm,
It's interesting. I was on a coaching call the other day, and I was kind of talking about like the issues that I have and how like I see these things as massive problems. And he said, stop for a second. He said, say your problems again. So I said them again. He goes, okay. If you told those problems to Elon Musk, what would Elon Musk do? He would probably laugh at it because there's such minor problems to someone like him, right? But you're living in it now. And in 5 years, those things that you were worried about you'll laugh at. They won't be a
Mm,
problem. So why don't you take what you know is going to come into the future of like they're not that big of a deal,
mm,
rewind time and place them in the present.
mm.
I was
I
like,
like
man,
that.
that's wild. And there's a crazy statistic on anxiety. I don't know if you've heard this, but like they talk about anxiety and the things that we worry about. And the stat says like 85% of the things that we worry about in the future never happen.
Yeah.
85% never happen. 12% actually they happen, but less worse than we thought they were going to happen.
Mm,
So only 3% of the things that we worry about actually happen as bad as we thought they were going to happen, which
yeah.
is wild.
That is
It's
wild.
crazy because like anxiety like runs people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
You
Oh, I
know, I'm
feel that.
guilty of it. I mean, shit, I, I'm, I don't want to say I have anxiety, but like I worry
Yeah.
about stuff in the future all the time, right?
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
saying like the things that I'm worrying about today, only 3% of those things are actually going to happen as bad as I
Mm,
think.
right.
Staggering statistic.
Yeah. And you can flip that. You can say 97% of my thoughts aren't even going to come to
Exactly.
fruition,
Yeah. Yeah. So
right?
why am I even worried about this? Like move
Right.
on, right?
That's so true. And I think that is good advice because it's allowing you to take a step back. Again, it's just allowing you to take a step back and look at your problems from like we said, like that 20,000 foot distance, and you're saying like that's really not that big of a deal. And it's like I can come up with solutions for that. And kind of like you said, like what's the worst that can happen? If the worst happens, it happens, right? It's just like, and then you figure out something else, right? I
Yeah.
think I always respect the people who are able to think like that. I think I just heard a quote from Bill Burr the other day. And Bill Burr was just like, he's like, why do always people think the worst shit's gonna happen? He goes, just think it's fine until it's not fine. It's just like,
Love
and
that.
that it's so true. It's just like it's fine till it's not, right? Like assume it's gonna be fine. It's all gonna work out until it doesn't, right? And if it doesn't, you figure some shit out. And I think
Yeah.
that is so so true. Um, what would you say is the biggest lesson you've pulled from running your own business while also trying to be a dad and be a husband? Like how is like what are the biggest lessons you pulled from trying to wear so many hats at once?
Yeah. Probably exactly what you said. Like stop wearing so many hats at once.
Yeah.
I mean, the more and more I get into business and the older I get, like the more and more I value a good team. Not
Mm,
that I didn't value it before, but I think, at least when I was younger, maybe I had more energy. Maybe I was, I thought I knew it all, but like I just wanted to do everything myself.
mm,
Like do it, get out of my way or join on with me. And I just tried to do everything.
mm,
Something would happen, like I would just pick it up and do it. Right. I was like, I don't have time to teach anybody how to do this. Like I can just do it myself, much faster, much easier. By the time I teach someone how to do it, like it's going to take 2 to 3 times the amount of time. I'll just do it and I can do it way better.
mm,
And I've learned like through doing this that there's levels. I don't want to say levels to the game, but levels to different positions. Not that, my level is greater than anyone else's, but there's certain things that I have to be able to handle from a high level business standpoint
mm.
that I often like dig back into the weeds to do these small, minute tasks that other people can do.
Right.
So it's like, what can I do and only I can do? I focus on those things. Anything else that I can outsource, I make sure that I pass that on to a team
Mm,
and I build those individuals up. People thrive off of responsibility. A lot of times as leaders, like we think that we're burdening people with putting responsibility on them, when in fact it's the opposite. Right? People want things to own. People want things to be able to accomplish. People love mastery. People
mm,
love independence. So a lot of times, if you give that responsibility to someone, they'll take it and run with it. And the biggest lesson I learned is like they don't need to do it 100% as good as I do it or someone else does it.
mm,
If they can just do it 70, 80%, and I can take that time and focusing on something higher level, the business will move in a much faster pace in a much better direction.
Mm, I love that. And I think that is a skill, right? Being able to delegate and take less off your plate so you can focus on the tasks that you excel at, right? I think through that process, you find out I'm good at this. I suck shit at this, right? This person's
Yeah.
actually great at this. Let me give that to them. I think that's again, it's self-awareness, right? And it's executing and being comfortable and being at peace with giving responsibility to someone else, especially when it's like your own business. How do
Yeah.
you how do you find balance running a business while also being a family man? So I think that's something I'm definitely, as I get older and like my plans one day to start a family, all these things, like I think that's one of my biggest curiosities is how do you do all these things while still being present and showing up for at least maybe for some what matters most.
Yeah. To me, I don't believe in balance.
Mm,
Whether that's right or wrong, I just don't think that anything's going to balance out. Maybe through like a macro level over a long period of time, things will
mm,
balance. But a
mm-hmm,
lot of people are looking for like short-term balance.
mm,
It's really impossible. It's impossible to be successful, like uber successful in one thing if you have balance, right? Because it's
mm,
going to take you away from it.
yeah,
So, for example, like, there might be times where I'm focused like all in on the business, right? And so I'm kind of pivoting this way and like less family time.
mm,
And then there's times the pendulum is going to swing the other way,
mm-hmm,
more family time. But it's never going to kind of sit in the middle on a micro
mm,
level. It
mm-hmm,
just won't.
right,
Uh, but there's something that actually Jason Phillips taught me this. It was one of like the main questions that he said to ask yourself from a business perspective, like what are you not willing to sacrifice?
mm,
I think for a long time I was like, what am I willing to sacrifice? And I'd write down all these little things, but like, what am I
yeah,
not willing to sacrifice? It's such a simple but yet easier, more powerful question to ask.
right,
And if your family is something you're not willing to sacrifice, you can't take it literally and say, okay, well, like I'm going to attend every single thing for my family and I'm going to be with them 100% of the time because that's not
mm,
fair to them either.
right,
Right? There's also lessons that you're going to be teaching by working hard in the business and doing things, but there are
mm,
certain things that I will not sacrifice when it comes to family for the business.
mm,
Right? Like if my kid has an important event, like I'm not going to choose business over that.
mm,
If that causes the business to grow a little bit slower, I'm okay with that because
yeah,
that is my non-negotiable. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
I think finding those non-negotiables and being true to it and not wavering from it,
mm,
is the most important because I think when depression happens when you're out of line with your beliefs and your actions.
mm,
And so if you truly believe that family is important, you're not going to sacrifice that, but like something happens in the business and pulls you away from that,
mm-hmm,
it, that shift starts to happen. And
yeah,
that's when you start getting depressed and things start going downhill. Just to
mm-hmm,
always stay true to that. Like, what are you not willing to sacrifice?
mm-hmm,
Write that down.
mm,
A little movie reference. This might not make any sense, but have you seen Draft Day?
yes,
Yeah, all right. I'm a movie guy, but
me
what he
too.
writes down on the piece of paper? What did he write
Mhm.
down on the piece of paper?
Oh, I'm blanking on it right now.
He,
Go
he
ahead.
said he said draft whatever linebacker no matter what.
Mm,
And he put that in his pocket. And so he started making all these crazy decisions that like veered away from that. Like
mm,
his whole life started crumbling down.
mm.
I don't want to spoil the movie, but I just did, I guess. He eventually went back to kind of what his one thing that he wanted to accomplish was, and boom, everything kind of fell into place. So
Mm,
whether that's a roundabout way of answering your question or not, like there,
yeah,
there could be some nuggets and value in there. I don't
yeah,
know.
absolutely. Well, I think kind of what you said is like finding what aligns with you and what you value and your standards and what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do that creates I guess it's like you're kind of creating your own version of balance, right? It's not what we perceive as like right down the middle, right? It's like your version of balance is I'm going to really lean into work right now and I'm going to allow myself the opportunity to show up for my family during certain things, right? And that's my standard. And then other points where it's like I'm leaning into family right now because this is really valuable for me. And being able to understand that I want to be the person or the father or the business owner that aligns with what I love because that's going to continue to create more of those opportunities for you down the line. And I think that is really that's very insightful. And I think that is a lot of people tend to think balance, like you mentioned, is short term, right down the middle. I could do both. I could do it all, right? It's like reality you probably can't, but you can show up for what you actually want and what you and not when you don't want, right? I think that is the true value in that.
And
Um,
the
go ahead.
glue that holds that mold is it's communication,
Hmm.
right? Especially when you're dealing with family and business, right? If you're having these conversations with your significant other, with your children, depending on their age and everything like that, and letting them know what's going on in the business life and the family life, and letting them know, like,
Hmm.
look, you know, during this time period, I'm going to be focusing a little bit more time on the business, but
Hmm.
here's why. So
Hmm.
you have like a joint vision now together with
Yeah,
your significant other. Like they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And
right.
they're not just seeing you put all these extra hours in the business for what? Well,
Mm,
if you're not having that conversation, they don't know, right? And so
yeah.
they start getting resentful. And that's when like things go bad when that communication's not there. But if you're
Mm,
if you're forecasting, vision planning, things like that, all that will come together. And I mean, for anyone watching that's a business owner, for you too, like
mm,
I think a lot of times we plan really, really well. I mean, me and you just did it, right? We
right.
plan for the business for days,
Mm-hmm.
right? Weeks. You do it every quarter, every month, every week. You're
Mm-hmm.
planning for the business. But a lot of business owners forget to plan for your personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is that imbalance, right? When all they have to do is say, okay, I plan for the business. Let me plan for the personal, and let me connect the two
Mm-hmm.
and let my significant other like in on both sides of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They don't have to be involved in the business, but they have to understand what's going on and why
Mm-hmm.
we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that's another one of my favorite words and one of my favorite qualities I love in people is communication because I think that is so important, especially like you said, when you're trying to have a family and, have this work or business that you are developing and is another passion of yours is communicating the we could say storms ahead, or you can say communicating the bigger waves ahead that you will be navigating and having to dedicate more of your energy. I think that's I don't think people do enough of it because like you said, like it builds resentment, it builds mistrust, it builds just more poor communication, right? And I think just by simply communicating what's coming up in the future, what and the context, like why it's important to you, how can I best show up for you in this time while you knowing that this is what my main focus will be, right? I think and you understand each other's needs, right? And you understand what the at least minimum requirement will be for each other during that time and your responsibilities. I think that is huge. It's huge, and I think it's really, really underused.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you, and then we'll send you on your way. So obviously the name of this podcast is These Little Moments Podcast. And big reason for that is for me, one of my big little moments in life was addressing like a crowd of 50 plus people at this seminar one time and being very vulnerable and sharing that I was struggling mentally and that uh, it was just a big moment for me that really became a catalyst for me continuing on my mental health journey and showing up for myself and which has allowed me to show up for others in more ways than I ever thought possible. What would you say if there is a little moment in your life that allowed you to become the person that you are today?
I mean, I think I hit a lot of those on the head. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously my experience with my coach was a pivotal,
Mm-hmm.
moment in my life. Obviously sports have had a huge impact. Quitting my job and taking that leap, was big.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't want to say this was a pivotal moment, but it is something that I haven't shared. I don't, this sounds like really drastic. The day I almost died.
Mm.
It's not that crazy of a story, but it kind of is. I was in Brazil. We were going spear fishing. I don't know if you
Oh,
ever
wow.
spear fishing
I've never
before, but
spearfished.
you wear like a metal weighted belt because
Oh,
it's got to
wow.
like weigh you down. And you have like the
Hmm.
spear gun and everything like that. And I was out on the boat and I jumped in with my wife's uncle and swimming around for a while. And then his other uncle came back in and I didn't take a rest and I was swimming and I was going underwater. I'm starting to lose my breath a little bit. I started getting a little bit tired
Mm.
and I could have swam longer, but I looked back at the boat and I was so far away from the boat.
Oh, wow.
Like the boat was like this big. And all of a sudden I started to panic.
Hmm.
Like I was fine until I realized that the boat was so far from me that it would be a feat to try to swim to.
Mm.
So I started freaking out a little bit, started like huffing and puffing. I've never experienced something like that before. And then I was like, he didn't speak any English, but I knew a little bit of Spanish. He spoke Portuguese. I said, muy cansado, muy cansado. Thankfully, it translates in both languages. He swam
Hmm.
over to me. Like I gave him the metal belt. Like he guided me to, a coral reef that I
Mm.
could have easily swam to if my brain was actually working.
Right.
But like I don't want to say like all hope was gone.
Hmm.
And that's when like panic set in. And so I sat there on the rock. I was like, holy shit, like I could have been a goner.
Mm.
But then afterwards, I think was like the bigger revelation was like, it was all in my head.
Mm.
Like it had nothing to do with my physical condition
Mm.
because I was not freaking out the way that I freaked out until I saw the boat. And I was like, God, like so much of life is like that,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
It's like it's all upstairs in the way that we kind of see our present, see our future, and like that little bit of hope that if you can find it or give somebody that, it's a powerful thing.
I love that. And that would scare the fuck out of me, candidly, if it was
Yeah.
like
Meanwhile, my wife is in the boat, like reading Harry Potter, like
right.
just chilling. I'm like almost dead on the other side of the ocean. Like I came back in the boat, like she's like, "How was it?" I was like, "I'll tell you later." I'm
Right.
done.
Right. Finish
Uh,
Chamber of Secrets.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hope you were enjoying the book.
Right, exactly. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, man, because that I think that is really powerful. And I think those situations tend to, you know, allow you to appreciate the little things a lot, definitely a lot more. And especially when it feels like it's that life or death scenario. So I appreciate you sharing that a ton. Uh,
Absolutely.
where can people find you, my friend?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always available via email, dposen@soldierfit.com. You can follow me on Instagram, Dave Posen, Facebook, Dave Posen. You want to check out Soldier Fit, the www.soldierfit.com. Check it out there. But yeah, that's it.
That's
Feel
it,
free to
baby.
shoot me a DM, send me an email, whatever it might be. Here to help. Yeah.
Round of applause for man. Thank you, dude. I appreciate you a ton. And thank you for hopping on this. And yeah, thank you guys for listening to this episode. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out, guys.
Later, guys.